A billionaire's daughter saw a poor woman with no food and said, "Daddy, can she have dinner with us?" And what he does is unbelievable. The fork stopped in mid-air. Caleb Hartley looked out the restaurant window and saw his 6-year-old daughter observing something outside with an intensity he rarely saw. "What are you looking at, Lila?" The blonde girl pressed her face against the window, leaving a small breath mark on the glass. "That lady over there." Caleb followed his daughter's gaze. Across the street, a woman was sitting on a worn bench. She had blonde hair pulled back in a simple style and was wearing clothes that had seen better days, a navy blue blouse and jeans with signs of wear. She was watching the city's movement, but there was something quiet about her posture, as if she were trying to become invisible. "She looks lonely, Daddy." Caleb returned his attention to his plate. It was Thursday, their special dinner day with Lila, a tradition he had religiously maintained since her mother left 2 years ago. The Bella Vista was a small but cozy restaurant with dark wood tables and warm yellow lights that created a familiar atmosphere. It wasn't luxurious, but it had good Italian food and a warm service. She must be waiting for someone. I don't think she's waiting for anyone. The certainty in Lila's voice made him look again. The woman was still there, motionless. She wasn't on her phone, wasn't checking her watch, wasn't tapping her fingers. She was just watching the people on the sidewalk. So why do you think that? Because when we wait for someone, we move our hands or look around. She's not doing any of that. She's just there. Caleb smiled. He sometimes forgot how observant Lila was for a 6-year-old. "Daddy, can she have dinner with us?" The question came so naturally that Caleb almost choked on his water. "Lila, we don't even know her." "But you always say it's important to be kind to people." "Yes, but that doesn't mean we should." "And she looks like she's hungry." Caleb tilted his head, intrigued. "How do you know that?" "She kept looking over here when the waiter brought our food." And then she quickly looked away, like when I look at the chocolate cake in the bakery, but no, I can't ask for it. He looked at his daughter again. Lila's bright eyes shone with a determination he knew well. When she set her mind to something, it was almost impossible to make her change it. "Are you sure about this?" "I am." "Can we ask her?" "Please?" Before Caleb could answer, Lila was already getting up. He sighed and followed her to the restaurant door, trying to think of a delicate way to approach a stranger on the street. The woman looked up as they approached. Up close, Caleb could see that she was younger than he had thought, maybe 30 years old. She had light eyes like Lila's, a grayish blue, but with a depth that spoke of difficult experiences. "Hi," Lila said, with the typical simplicity of children. "Do you want to have dinner with us?" The woman blinked, clearly surprised. For a moment, it looked like she was going to get up and run away. I don't have any money." "That's okay," Lila continued, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "My daddy can pay. He has a company." Caleb felt his face get hot. Lila had a knack for being too direct at moments like these. "What my daughter is trying to say," he intervened quickly, "is that it would be our pleasure if you joined us. No strings attached." The woman looked from Caleb to Lila, as if she was trying to figure out if this was real. "I don't want to be a bother." "You won't be a bother," Lila said, holding out her small hand. "I'm Lila. What's your name?" "Grace. Grace Whitmore." "There. Now we know each other. Come on." Grace hesitated for another moment, looking at Caleb for confirmation. He nodded, trying to convey that the invitation was genuine. "All right," she said finally. "Thank you." Back in the restaurant, Caleb asked for an extra chair. Grace sat down carefully, as if she didn't want to take up too much space. "Do you like pasta?" Lila asked, already flipping through the menu with familiarity. "I do." "Then you'll like the spaghetti here. It's the best I've ever had." Grace smiled for the first time since she had sat down, and Caleb noticed how it completely transformed her face. It was as if a light had been turned on. "So do you live nearby?" he asked, trying to start a conversation, more or less. The answer was vague but polite. Caleb decided not to press. Grace was clearly a woman of few words. When the waiter came to take their order, Grace only asked for a small Caesar salad. "Just that," Lila frowned. "Aren't you very hungry?" I'm fine with this. But Daddy always says that salad is just a side dish, not real dinner. Caleb intervened quickly. How about we share some appetizers? Garlic bread? Bruschetta? Grace hesitated, but eventually agreed. During the meal, Lila carried most of the conversation. She talked about school, about her drawings of horses, about the golden retriever puppy she wanted for her 7th birthday. Grace listened with genuine attention, asking simple questions that showed real interest. What do you do for work? Lila asked at one point, chewing a piece of bread. Grace paused. I'm between jobs right now. Oh, my daddy says that happens sometimes. It's true, it does. Caleb observed Grace during the meal. She ate slowly, as if she wanted to make the food last. Her manners were naturally polite, almost formal. There was something about her that suggested she hadn't always been in this situation. When dessert arrived, Lila had insisted on sharing a piece of tiramisu. Grace visibly relaxed. Thank you, she said when they finished. It's been a long time since She didn't finish the sentence, but Caleb understood. It was a pleasure having your company, seriously. Grace got up to leave, but Lila held her hand. Will you come back here sometimes? I sometimes pass by here. Cool. Maybe we'll see each other again. Grace knelt down to be at Lila's height. Maybe so. Thank you for inviting me. You were very kind. She waved one last time and left, leaving behind only the soft echo of her presence and a faint scent of simple soap. She's nice, Lila said, returning to her chair and finishing the last bit of tiramisu. She is, and she has the same color hair as me. That's true. Later in the car, Lila was quiet in the back seat, looking out the window as the city passed by. Dad, can I choose where we have dinner next week? Of course. Where do you want to go? The same place. Caleb looked in the rearview mirror and saw the reflection of his daughter's bright eyes. Why? Just because I liked it. She went back to looking out the window, and he realized that sometimes it was better not to press for answers to questions that children weren't ready to answer. The next morning, Caleb woke up with Lila's voice echoing in his mind. Just because I liked it. There was something in the simplicity of that answer that bothered him. It wasn't just about the restaurant, he knew that. It was about Grace. After dropping Lila off at school instead of going straight to the office, Caleb found himself driving back to the city center. He didn't have a specific plan, just a restlessness he couldn't explain. Something about Grace Whitmore had sparked his curiosity in a way he hadn't experienced in a long time. He parked near the Bella Vista and walked around the area. The neighborhood was an interesting mix, antique shops next to modern cafes, historic buildings sharing space with newer constructions. It was the kind of place where different worlds met without necessarily mixing. After 40 minutes of aimless walking, he saw her. Grace was standing in front of a low, worn red brick building. A discreet sign at the entrance read, St. Francis Community Center. She was holding a small, scuffed backpack and talking to an older woman at the door. The woman was wearing a blue apron and gesticulating in a motherly way. Caleb hesitated behind a tree. He didn't want to look like a stalker, but he also couldn't just walk away. There was something about Grace's posture that intrigued him. She held her head high, even while clearly needing help. The conversation ended quickly. The older woman went into the building, but not before affectionately touching Grace's shoulder. Grace was left alone on the sidewalk, looking at the backpack in her hands as if she were making a difficult decision. That's when she noticed him. Caleb? The surprise in her voice was genuine, mixed with embarrassment. He approached, feeling slightly ashamed to be there. Hi, Grace. I was just passing by. She looked around. The street had nothing that would justify someone just passing by without a reason. Passing by? All right, I wasn't. He decided to be honest. I was looking for you. Why? The question was direct, not hostile, but also without the shy kindness of the night before. I don't know exactly. Lila kept talking about you all the way home yesterday, and I was curious. Grace adjusted the backpack strap on her shoulder. Caleb noticed that she carried everything she owned in that small bag. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. Curious about what? About who you are. about how a person like you ended up sitting on that bench. For a moment, she didn't answer. Then she started walking slowly down the sidewalk. Caleb walked with her. Do you have children, Caleb? Just Lila and her mum. She's no longer in our lives. She decided that motherhood wasn't for her. Grace nodded, as if she understood that there were stories that didn't need to be told in full. Lila is a special girl. She has eyes that see things. She does. Sometimes I think she sees the world in a way that adults have lost the ability to. They walked in silence for a few blocks. The morning traffic was different from the night before, more hurried, more focused, people going to work, children being taken to school. The normal rhythm of a city waking up. The community center, Caleb said finally. Do you stay there? Sometimes they offer a few services, meals, showers, help with documents, a safe place to spend the night when needed. Her honesty surprised him. There was no shame in her voice, just a pragmatic acceptance of reality. Grace, if you need help, I'm not looking for pity. Her voice became firmer, more defined. I just won't be invisible. There was a dignity in the way she said that made Caleb stop walking. Invisible? You know how it is. When you don't have a fixed address, people start looking right through you, as if you're just part of the urban landscape. They had stopped in front of a small square. Grace sat on a bench, different from the one the night before, but equally worn by time. Can I sit? She nodded. How did you end up here? Caleb asked. Grace was quiet for a long moment, looking at the trees in the square. Do you really want to know? I do. I was a senior consultant at an auditing firm, Morrison and Associates. I worked on financial analysis, process review, tax compliance. Her voice was calm, but there was a contained pain in the words. I had a nice apartment, a car, a savings account, a normal life. What happened? I found significant irregularities in an account I was auditing. Large amounts being siphoned off through a complex network of poorly documented transactions. It wasn't a bookkeeping error. It was deliberate, well-planned fraud. Caleb leaned forward, realizing he was about to hear something important. Did you report it? Of course, it was my job. It was my ethical obligation. Grace let out a bitter laugh. Apparently, some people didn't see it that way. What happened next? The person responsible for the irregularities had powerful connections, knew important people. Suddenly, I wasn't the auditor who had uncovered fraud anymore. I was the problematic employee who was trying to hurt the company. Caleb felt a tightness in his stomach. They fired you. Worse, they blamed me. They said I had planted false evidence, that I was trying to blackmail the company. My reputation in the market was destroyed overnight. Grace stopped talking and watched a group of pigeons looking for crumbs near a trash can. No one else wanted to hire me. Companies were afraid to associate with someone involved in dubious ethical issues. That's the term they used. But that's absurd. You did the right thing. I did. But sometimes doing the right thing comes at a high price. Caleb processed the information. Everything made sense now. Grace's polite manners, the way she spoke, the natural dignity in her gestures. How long ago was this? 8 months. I spent all my savings trying to get by while I looked for work. I lost the apartment, the car, practically everything. What about your family, friends? My parents died a few years ago. I was an only child. As for friends, she shrugged. It's amazing how people disappear when you need them most. They sat in silence for a few minutes. Caleb tried to imagine what it would be like to lose everything like that, to have your life turned upside down for doing what was right. Grace, can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you tell me all this? You barely know me. She looked him directly in the eyes. Yeah, because you really asked, and because your daughter saw me as a person, not a problem. The simplicity of the answer touched him deeply. I need to go, Grace said, getting up. I have a job interview at 2. Really? That's great. It's for a part-time position at a clothing store. It's not really my field, but work is work. Exactly. Caleb stood up as well. Grace, do you have a place to stay tonight? I do. The community center has a temporary shelter program. When they reached the car, Caleb hesitated. Grace, I wanted... Caleb. She interrupted him. Thank you for listening to me today. It's been a long time since I had a normal conversation with someone. It was important for me too. They said goodbye, and Caleb watched her walk towards the bus stop. But instead of going to the office, he stayed there, thinking about their conversation. Grace wasn't just a person in need. She was a competent professional who had been wronged, a woman of integrity who had paid a high price for her honesty. And now she was living a reality that no one should have to face. The image of Grace carrying her entire life in a backpack wouldn't leave his mind. That afternoon, after picking Lila up from school, Caleb couldn't focus on work. Grace's story had shaken him more than he expected. He knew the corporate world well enough to know that this kind of thing happened, honest people being sacrificed to protect bigger interests. Around 6 in the evening, he made a decision. Lila, how about we go for a drive? Where to? Just for a drive. I want to check on something. He drove to the St. Francis Community Center. He wasn't sure if Grace would still be there, but it was worth a try. He found her sitting on the front steps, reading a worn paperback book. She looked tired, and Caleb had a feeling the interview hadn't gone well. How was the interview? He asked, approaching. Grace looked up, surprised to see him again. Not very good. They said they'll call me, but from the tone, I don't think they will. I'm sorry. Another opportunity will come along. Lila got out of the car and ran over to them. Grace, it's so nice to see you again. Hi, Lila. How was school today? It was great. We learned about horses in science class. As Lila talked about her class, Caleb observed Grace. There was a natural patience in the way she interacted with his daughter, a genuine, unforced attention. Grace, he said when Lila paused, can I talk to you for a moment? They walked a few steps away, leaving Lila playing with a butterfly. I've been thinking about our conversation this morning, and... Caleb looked at Grace, at her backpack, at the tiredness in her eyes, at the dignity she maintained despite everything. I want to make a proposal. I want to offer you a place to stay. Come live with us, at least until you can get back on your feet and figure out what you want to do. Grace blinked, clearly surprised. Caleb, I appreciate it, but I don't need charity. It's not charity, it's acknowledgement. Acknowledgement? You're a person of integrity who was wronged for doing the right thing. You have skills, experience, intelligence. You shouldn't be living like this. He gestured towards the community center, and he looked at Lila, who was trying to convince the butterfly to land on her hand. And my daughter likes you. That doesn't happen easily. Lila is selective with people. Grace followed his gaze. Caleb, you barely know me. How can you be sure that... I know enough. I know you have principles. I know you treated Lila with kindness yesterday. I know you won't accept being invisible, but you also don't wallow in your situation. Grace fell silent, processing the proposal. We have a big house, Caleb continued. Lots of space. You would have your own room, your privacy. And maybe you could help me with Lila sometimes. Not as a babysitter, but as an adult presence. And in return, you have time to regroup, to look for a job in your field without the pressure of having nowhere to stay, without having to accept just anything to survive. Grace looked at him for a long moment. Why are you doing this? Caleb thought about the question. Because yesterday, for a few hours, my daughter had an interesting adult to talk to besides me. Because you made our evening better just by being there. And because... He paused. Because sometimes we have the chance to make a difference in someone's life, and it would be wrong to waste that chance. Grace looked at Lila, who was now humming softly. Are you sure about this? Absolutely. And Lila, does she know about this proposal? Not yet, but I can ask her now if you'd like. Grace took a deep breath. You don't have to. I accept. Seriously, but with a few conditions. What are they? First, this is temporary, until I can get back on my feet. Second, I'll contribute what I can, cleaning, cooking, whatever is necessary. And third, if at any point you regret it or I feel uncomfortable, we'll talk about it openly. No drama, no resentment. Caleb held out his hand. Deal. Grace shook his hand. and for the first time since he had met her, he saw a genuine smile light up her face. "Lila," Caleb called. "Come here for a minute." The girl ran over to them. "Grace is going to be staying at our house for a while. What do you think?" Lila's eyes lit up. "Really? That's so cool. Are you going to sleep in the guest room?" "If that's okay," Grace replied. "Of course it is. Now I can show you my horse drawings. I'd love to see them." As they walked back to the car, Caleb felt that he had made the right decision. He didn't know exactly what to expect, but he had a good feeling about it all. Grace was carrying only her small backpack. "Is that all you have?" "It's all I need for now." The answer reminded him once again how drastically her life had changed. But there was a strength in Grace that impressed him. She had lost almost everything, but she hadn't lost herself. "Then let's go home," he said, opening the car door. "Let's go home," Grace repeated, and for the first time in months, the word home had meaning again. On the first morning, Caleb woke up to a sound he hadn't heard in a long time, the soft clatter of someone moving around the kitchen. It wasn't the hurried footsteps of someone running late for work, nor the clanging of dishes being stacked in a rush before running out the door. It was something completely different, a calm, almost musical rhythm that seemed to fill the empty spaces of the house. He came downstairs still half asleep and found Grace making coffee. She had tied her blonde hair in a simple, torn, relaxed bun and was wearing one of the t-shirts he had lent her the night before. The t-shirt was too big for her small frame, but somehow it looked exactly right on her. "Good morning," she said, turning with a shy but genuine smile. "I hope you don't mind me making coffee." "Of course I don't mind. In fact, it's really nice." It was more than nice. It was comforting in a way that Caleb didn't know he had been missing so much. Lila ran down the stairs a few minutes later, still in her unicorn print pajamas, and stopped abruptly when she saw Grace there. "You really stayed." "I did. How did you sleep?" "Very well, and you?" "Is the guest room comfortable enough?" "Very comfortable. Thank you for asking." Caleb watched the interaction between the two with attention. There was something completely natural in the way Grace spoke to Lila, without the artificially childish voice that many adults automatically used with kids. During breakfast, Grace remained discreetly present. She didn't try to take control of the situation or impose her presence in an intrusive way. She was just there, contributing softly and almost imperceptibly to everyone's well-being. "You need to get ready for school in 15 minutes, Lila," Caleb said, looking at the clock on the wall. "I'll go get dressed." Lila hesitated for a moment, biting her bottom lip. "Grace, will you be here when I get back from school?" "I'll be here. Promise." "I promise." The smile Lila gave was absolutely luminous, transforming her whole face. After Caleb and Lila left, he for work, she for school, Grace began tidying up the kitchen with careful movements. When Caleb came back quickly to grab a document he had forgotten, he found her washing the dishes. "Grace, you don't have to do that." "I know I don't have to, but I want to help in some way." "That's fine. But please don't feel obligated to do anything." She nodded understandingly, continuing to wash the dishes with precise, careful movements, as if each plate were important. When Caleb came home from work that afternoon, he found the house was different. Nothing was visibly out of place. In fact, everything was exactly where it should be, maybe even more organized than usual. But there was something indefinable in the air, a clear sense that the house was breathing in a completely different way. Grace was in the living room, sitting comfortably on the floor with Lila, surrounded by school books and notebooks neatly spread out. "And this problem here?" Grace pointed patiently to a math question in the notebook. 15, Lila replied after concentrated counting on her fingers. "That's right. You're doing very well with these problems." Caleb stood in the doorway for a few moments, just watching the scene. How long had it been since he had seen Lila do her homework without complaining, without protesting, without trying to escape? "Hi, Daddy," Lila waved enthusiastically when she noticed him. "Grace is helping me with math, and I'm understanding everything." "I can see that. How was school today?" As Lila talked animatedly about her day, about PE class, about the new book the teacher had shown her, about the classmate who had fallen in the playground, Caleb noticed how Grace listened to every word. She didn't just hear the words being said, but paid real and complete attention to what Lila was sharing. She asked relevant questions and was interested in the small details that were important to a 6-year-old. In the following days, a routine began to form in a completely natural and organic way. Grace woke up first every morning, made fresh coffee and had everything ready for breakfast, not in an intrusive or controlling way, but as someone who genuinely wanted to contribute to the family's well-being. After Caleb and Lila left for their commitments, she carefully organized the house, always respecting everyone's personal and private spaces. In the afternoon, when Lila came home from school, Grace was always there waiting, not just physically present, but truly available, with a simple snack prepared and completely ready to help with schoolwork or just talk. "Tell me about your day," she said every day, and Lila always had a lot to say. Grace listened to everything with a truly genuine patience. The detailed stories about classmates, the specific complaints about the PE teacher who was too strict, the fascinating discoveries about the horses that Lila loved to draw obsessively. One sunny afternoon, Caleb came home a little earlier and found the two of them on the back porch. Grace was sitting in a wooden chair, reading a book aloud with expressive intonation, and Lila was lying comfortably on the green grass, drawing horses while she listened to the story. "And then," Grace continued in an engaging voice, "the wild horse galloped across the endless prairie, its golden mane shining brightly in the late afternoon sun." Lila sighed happily, without stopping her drawing. "I really like it when you read stories, Grace. Your voice is different." "Different how?" "Calm. Like you really know the horses in the story personally." Grace smiled warmly, continuing her reading unhurriedly. Caleb approached slowly on the porch, not wanting to interrupt the magical moment he was witnessing. "Daddy!" Lila saw him first, looking up from her drawing. "Grace knows a lot of incredible horse stories." "She does. How lucky we are. I don't know that many stories," Grace said modestly, closing the book and marking the page. "But I really like reading to you." "You can keep reading, please," Caleb said, sitting in a nearby chair and relaxing. "But I also want to know what happens to the wild horse." Grace hesitated for a moment, clearly surprised by the request, then continued reading with her naturally engaging voice. Her narration had a special quality that made even Caleb genuinely interested in the simple adventure story. At night, after Lila went to sleep, Caleb and Grace developed a habit of staying in the living room talking. She always offered to make chamomile tea, and without either of them consciously realizing it, those quiet moments became extremely important to them both. "How was your day at work?" she asked with real interest. And somehow, Caleb found himself telling her things he normally carefully kept to himself, about the specific challenges at work, about the constant worries about Lila, about how he sometimes felt completely lost, trying to be both a father and a mother at the same time, about the loneliness he wouldn't admit to anyone. Grace listened to everything without judgment, offering helpful perspectives when asked, but mostly offering something much more valuable: genuine presence and complete attention. "You're so good with her," Caleb said one night, watching Grace through the window as she helped Lila pick flowers from the garden. "Lila is a special girl. It's easy to be good with her. It's more than that. You have a natural way with kids." Grace was quiet for a moment, thoughtfully stirring her tea. "I always wanted to have kids," she said finally, with a subtle sadness in her voice. "But the time was never right." "And then your life was completely turned upside down." "Exactly." They fell into a comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts and memories. As the days went by, the house really started to breathe differently. There was more frequent laughter echoing through the rooms, interesting conversations during meals, a palpable sense of completeness that Caleb didn't know he was desperately missing. Grace never tried to take on the role of Lila's mother. Instead, she became something unique and special, a stable adult presence that offered genuine friendship, unconditional support, and caring without expectations. One afternoon, Lila came home from school visibly quieter than usual, dragging her backpack on the floor. "What happened today?" Grace asked immediately, noticing the subtle change in her mood. "Nothing," Lila mumbled, throwing the heavy backpack on the floor in frustration. Grace didn't press or force the situation. Instead, she silently prepared Lila's favorite snack, cookies with warm milk, and waited patiently. After a few minutes of silence, Lila started talking on her own. "Sarah said that I don't have a real mum." Grace stopped what she was doing completely and turned to Lila. "And what did you say back to her?" "That my mum left because she didn't want to stay here with me anymore." "And how did that make you feel to say that?" Lila thought carefully for a moment, sad but also, "I don't know. A little mad too." Grace sat down calmly next to Lila at the kitchen table. "Do you know what I think about that?" "What?" "I think that families come in all possible shapes and sizes. Some have a mom and a dad. Others only have a dad. Others only have a mom. Some have grandparents, aunts, uncles, or dear friends who become family." Lila listened with complete attention, slowly chewing her cookie. "The important thing isn't how many people you have in your family, but how much those people truly care about you." "And do you care about me?" Grace smiled warmly, tucking a lock of blonde hair behind Lila's small ear. "Very much. You've become very important to me. You're very important to me too." When Caleb came home that night, he found Lila much more animated and talkative than she had been in the morning. "How was she today?" he discreetly asked Grace later. Grace told him about the conversation, about what her classmate Sarah had cruelly said at school. "Joey, thank you," Caleb said with sincere gratitude, "for knowing exactly what to say to her. She just needed to be heard and have her feelings validated. Even so, thank you very much." A week later, Caleb was working at home on the computer when he heard loud laughter coming from the kitchen. He approached, curious, and saw Grace and Lila making cookies together. There was white flour spread over most of the countertop, but both of them were laughing uncontrollably. "Daddy," Lila ran over to him, leaving small flour footprints on the clean floor. "We're making horse-shaped cookies." "I see. And from the looks of it, you're making quite a mess too." Grace said it's no problem at all, Lila replied happily, "because cleaning up together afterward is part of the fun." Caleb looked at Grace, who was unsuccessfully trying to get flour out of her blonde hair. "It's true," she said, smiling broadly. "And besides, Lila is learning to measure ingredients correctly. It's practical and useful math." "Can I help you?" "Of course," Lila shouted enthusiastically. "You can make the horses' manes." For the next hour and a half, the three of them worked together in the messy kitchen. Caleb couldn't remember the last time he had had so much fun doing something so simple and ordinary. When the cookies were finally in the oven, filling the house with a sweet aroma, he looked around. The kitchen was a real mess, but there was something so profoundly right about the whole situation. "You know," he said to Grace while Lila ran to wash her dough-sticky hands, "you don't take up space here." Grace looked at him with curiosity, wiping her hands on her apron. "You complete the space." She was quiet for a long moment, clearly touched by the observation. Thank you, that means a lot to me." It's the honest truth. That night, after Lila went to sleep, exhausted and happy, Caleb thought about the profound transformation his house had undergone. They weren't dramatic or obvious changes that jumped out at you. It was something much more subtle and significant. Meals were longer because there were genuinely interesting conversations. Afternoons were quieter because Lila had someone patient to help her with homework. Evenings were cozier because Grace always made aromatic tea and created a natural atmosphere of calm and peace. She had fit into their lives without forcing anything, without trying to fundamentally change who they were. Instead, she had amplified and enriched what was already good. Lila was visibly more confident, more communicative, and happier in general. And Caleb, well, Caleb no longer felt like he was doing everything alone, carrying the entire weight of responsibility. Grace never tried to replace the mother Lila never really had. She offered something completely different, and perhaps even more valuable: genuine friendship, unconditional support, and a stable presence that made all the difference in the world. One evening, while Grace was reading yet another engaging horse story to Lila on the back porch, Caleb watched silently from the living room window. There was something profoundly right about that simple scene. Grace with her calm and naturally engaging voice, Lila lying on the grass with her colorful drawings spread around, both completely comfortable and relaxed with each other. The house really breathed differently now. There was vibrant life where before there had only been mechanical routine. There was spontaneous laughter where before there had only been functional necessity. There was genuine human connection where before there had only been the basic functionality of survival. Grace had transformed not only the physical environment of the house, but the emotional energy of everything. Without forced effort, without unnecessary drama, without grand theatrical gestures. Just by being herself, kind, present, genuinely interested in the well-being of the people around her. And the most incredible thing was that she seemed just as naturally comfortable there as they were with her presence, as if that had always been her destined place. As if she had always been part of the family, Caleb smiled, returning to the kitchen to prepare the evening tea that had become a sacred ritual. It had become a moment he looked forward to every day, those quiet, intimate moments with Grace after Lila was asleep, when they could talk honestly about the day, about life, about things that really mattered. Grace truly didn't take up space in the house. She completed it in a way he didn't even know was possible. And for the first time in a long time, Caleb felt that his house was truly a home. It had been 2 weeks since Grace moved in, and a routine had been naturally established. That Thursday, Caleb came home later than usual, carrying a briefcase full of documents and a worried expression that did not go unnoticed. "Rough day?" Grace asked, serving the dinner she had prepared. "It could have been better," Caleb replied, placing the heavy briefcase on the living room table. "Some numbers don't add up." Lila was in the living room watching cartoons, so Grace lowered her voice. "Serious problems?" "I don't know yet. That's why I brought work home." After dinner and putting Lila to bed, Caleb sat up at the living room table with the documents spread out. Grace was reading in a nearby armchair when she noticed his growing frustration. "Anything specific?" she asked. Caleb sighed, running his hand through his hair. "It's the quarterly reports. There are some discrepancies that I can't figure out." Grace hesitated for a moment. "Can I take a look? It used to be my field." Caleb looked at her, remembering her professional experience. "You wouldn't mind?" "Of course not. Maybe an outside perspective will help." Caleb gathered some documents and handed them to Grace. They're basically financial reports and some recent contracts. Grace took the papers and settled more comfortably in the armchair. For a few minutes, she read in silence, making mental notes. Caleb continued working, but occasionally glanced at her. "Caleb?" Grace said after half an hour, her voice suddenly serious. "Did you find something?" "I need to see more documents. Do you have the cash flow reports for the last 6 months?" The concern in her voice made Caleb stop what he was doing completely. "I do. Why?" "Just show me, please." Caleb went to his briefcase and brought out more documents. Grace examined them with increasing attention, comparing numbers and making some quick notes on a paper. "And the contracts with the main suppliers?" she asked. "I have them here, too." As Grace analyzed more documents, her expression grew more and more grave. She checked and rechecked the numbers, as if she hoped to have made a mistake. "Sigh, Grace, you're worrying me." She looked up from the papers. "Caleb, do you trust your financial director?" The question was so direct it caught him by surprise. "Marcus. Of course. He's been with the company for 5 years. Why?" Grace organized the documents on the table, separating a few specific ones. "Look here," she said, pointing to a spreadsheet. "Show us this contract with Steinberg Supplies. Yes, our main raw materials supplier. According to this document, you paid them $150,000 last month, correct?" Grace picked up another paper, but here, in the cash flow report, it's recorded as $180,000. Caleb frowned, taking the documents to look closer. "It must be a typo." "Maybe. But look at this." Grace showed another set of papers. "The same thing happens with at least 4 different suppliers. The amounts are always higher in the cash flow than in the original contracts." Caleb felt a chill in his stomach. "You think that?" "I don't want to jump to conclusions, I doubt, but the evidence is clear. Someone is manipulating the numbers." Grace continued examining the documents, her professional expertise taking over. "There's more," she said. "These payments to a company called Consulting Solutions. Do you know it?" Caleb looked at where she was pointing. "Never heard of it. They are monthly payments of $25,000 for 8 months. Described as administrative consulting. That doesn't make sense. We don't hire outside consultants." Grace picked up a calculator that was on the table. "Caleb, adding up all the discrepancies I found just in these documents, your company is losing approximately $80,000 per month." $80,000? At least. And that's just what I can see with this limited documentation. Caleb got up from the chair, pacing the room. "How is this possible? I review the reports monthly." "The reports that reach you are already adjusted," Grace explained. "It's a well-designed scheme. Small differences in various contracts, ghost payments to non-existent companies, always amounts that don't individually draw attention. But that add up to a serious financial drain." Grace got up and went to where Caleb was. "How long has Marcus had full access to the financial systems?" "Since he was promoted to director 2 years ago." "And when did the cash flow problems you mentioned start?" Caleb thought for a moment. "About 18 months ago. I thought it was the market, the competition." "Caleb," Grace said seriously, "if this continues, your company will go bankrupt." The sentence landed like a bomb in the silence of the room. "Are you sure?" "With the numbers I've seen, yes. The company is being systematically drained from the inside." Caleb sat down heavily on the couch. "What do I do?" "First, you need to verify all this discreetly. You can't alert Marcus yet." "How?" "Do you have direct access to the company's banking systems?" "I do." "Then you can check every transaction without going through the finance department. Compare the real transferred amounts with the reports Marcus gives you." Caleb nodded, absorbing the information. "And second, you need an independent accountant to do a full audit, someone Marcus doesn't know." "Grace, I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me yet. We need to be sure before we do anything." The next morning, Caleb arrived at the office earlier than usual. Before any employees arrived, he accessed the company's banking systems directly. An hour later, he called Grace. "You were right," he said, his voice tense. "I checked the last 10 transactions. All of them have the discrepancies you pointed out. And Consulting Solutions. I investigated. The company doesn't exist. The ID number is fake." Grace was silent for a moment. "Caleb, you need to act fast. If Marcus realizes you're investigating, he could destroy evidence." "Exactly." That afternoon, Caleb met with his lawyer and an independent accountant. He presented all the discoveries Grace had made, along with the confirmations he had obtained himself. "It's a clear case of embezzlement," the lawyer said. "Can't very well planned." If it hadn't been discovered now, the accountant added, the company would have serious problems in 6 months. Problems like what? Technical bankruptcy. The monthly losses were growing exponentially. The next day, with all the documentation in order and the proper authorities notified, Caleb confronted Marcus. The financial director initially tried to deny it, but the evidence was irrefutable. Marcus was fired for cause, and a criminal case was initiated. That night, Caleb came home exhausted but relieved. "How did it go?" Grace asked. He confessed everything. He's been siphoning off money for 2 years. And the company. It will survive. The accountant said we'll be able to recover a good part of what was stolen. But Grace, he stopped and looked at her directly. "You saved my company." Grace shook her head. "You're the one who brought the documents home. I just did what I knew how to do." "No. If you hadn't seen those discrepancies, in a few months I would have been bankrupt. All my employees would have been out of a job. I'm glad it could be prevented." "Grace saved Daddy's company?" Lila asked, appearing in the living room. "She did," Caleb replied. "Grace saved the company from a very serious crisis." Lila ran to Grace and hugged her. "You're so smart," Grace smiled, hugging her back. It was teamwork. Later, when Lila was asleep, Caleb and Grace talked on the porch. "Do you know what this means?" he said. "What?" "That you no longer have to look for work in stores. Your experience, your competence, It's more than proven how valuable you are. Grace was quiet, looking at the garden. It's strange, she said finally. What is, after so many months of being treated as if I didn't know anything, as if I were incompetent, it's nice to remember that I can still do my job. You don't just know how to do it. You're exceptional at what you do. Grace smiled, a different kind of smile than the others. There was pride there and relief. Thank you, Caleb, for trusting me. No, thank you, for saving everything I've built. They fell silent, each thinking about the implications of what had happened. Grace had proven not only her professional competence, but also her loyalty and integrity. For Caleb, it was clear that Grace was not just a guest in his house. She was someone he could completely trust, both personally and professionally. And for Grace, it was the confirmation that she hadn't lost her skills. She just needed the right opportunity to show them again. The company was saved. But more than that, Grace had regained her professional confidence. The Monday following the discovery of the fraud, Caleb arrived at the office with a decision made. He spent the morning reorganizing priorities and cancelling less important meetings. At 11 in the morning, he called Grace. "Can you come to the office today?" "Of course. Is everything okay?" "Nothing bad. I just want to talk to you about something important." Grace arrived at Caleb's company building around noon. It was a modern glass and steel building with the name Hartley Solutions discreetly displayed at the entrance. She had never been there before. "Impressive," she said when Caleb met her in the lobby. "Thank you. Come on, I want to show you everything." Caleb took her on a quick tour of the facilities. The company had approximately 40 employees, spread over 3 floors. Grace observed everything with professional attention. "It's a well-structured operation," she commented. "It was, until we found out it was being sabotaged from the inside." They went to Caleb's office, a large room with a view of the city. "Grace, I want to make you an offer," he said as soon as they sat down. "I'm listening. I was impressed with your clarity in analyzing the documents, and I want to offer you a position as an internal consultant." Grace blinked, surprised. "Caleb, that's very generous, but it's not generosity. It's a necessity. I need someone I can trust to restructure our financial processes." "Are you sure about this?" "Absolutely. You saved my company. Now I want you to help me make it stronger." Grace was quiet for a moment, considering the proposal. What exactly would the role be? Internal auditing, process restructuring, implementing new controls. Basically, ensuring that what happened with Marcus never happens again. And the salary? Caleb mentioned a figure that made Grace's eyes widen. "That's much more than I was earning at Morrison and Associates. You're worth it and more." Grace took a deep breath. "I accept." "Seriously? Seriously? When do we start? How about tomorrow?" The next day, Grace arrived at the office wearing a navy blue suit that she had bought on the way home the night before. It was her first new professional outfit in almost a year. Caleb introduced her to the team as the new internal consultant. Some employees greeted her with curiosity, others with skepticism. Everyone knew about the situation with Marcus and was apprehensive about changes. "I'm not here to fire anyone or to revolutionize everything overnight," Grace said at the introduction meeting. "I'm here to strengthen what already works and fix what can be improved." Her calm and professional approach gradually won over the team. In the first few weeks, Grace focused on fully understanding the existing processes. She talked individually with employees from all departments, always with patience and respect. "She really listens," Sandra from accounting commented to a colleague. "She doesn't pretend to understand everything." Grace implemented gradual but effective changes. She created new approval protocols for payments, established cross-audits, and developed more transparent reports. "The employees are calmer," Caleb observed during one of their nightly conversations. "Trust is returning." "That's what was missing," Grace replied. "When people don't trust the systems, they work with fear." At home, the routine continued the same. Grace still helped Lila with her schoolwork, still prepared dinners when she got home from work, and still had those nightly conversations with Caleb that had become essential for both of them. "How was work today?" Lila asked every day. "Good. I'm helping to make your dad's company more organized." Do you like working there? I do. It's good to use my skills again. Caleb observed how Grace naturally balanced the two facets of her life. In the office, she was the competent and respected consultant. At home, she continued to be the caring presence that had transformed the family environment. After 2 months of working at the company, Grace decided to do a deeper audit of the historical records. She wanted to fully understand how Marcus's scheme had gone unnoticed for so long. That's when she discovered something much worse. "Caleb," she said on a Thursday, walking into his office with a serious expression, "I need to show you something." "What happened?" Grace closed the door and placed some documents on the desk. "I found a much more serious fraud than Marcus's." "What do you mean?" "Marcus wasn't acting alone. And the scheme is much older than we thought." Grace showed him the documents she had discovered. Fake contracts dating back 4 years. Phantom companies created systematically. A complex network of diversions that went far beyond what Marcus could have organized alone. Who else was involved? Richard Mills. Caleb was in shock. Richard had been the company's vice president until he abruptly resigned 6 months ago, claiming a better offer in another city. Richard. But he was Marcus's mentor. "Look here." Grace pointed to the dates. The scheme started right after Richard was promoted to vice president. "How much money are we talking about?" "Over the last 4 years. Approximately $800,000. Caleb sat down heavily in his chair. 800,000. "At least, I'm still tracing all the operations." "What do we do now?" "The same thing as before. We document everything, we contact the authorities, and we take legal action." On Friday, while Grace was organizing the final evidence, her secretary informed her that she had a visitor. "Who is it?" "Richard Mills. He says it's urgent." Grace felt a chill down her spine. How did Richard know she was investigating? "I send him in." Richard walked into the room with the same confident smile Grace remembered from the few times she had seen him in the office. "Grace, it's a pleasure to see you again." "Richard, what brings you here?" "Let's get straight to the point. I like that." He sat down uninvited. "I know you've discovered some irregularities in the company's records." Grace kept her expression neutral. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you do. You're brilliant, Grace. Much more competent than I initially thought." "What do you want?" Richard leaned forward. "I want to offer you an opportunity. Work with me. A senior position, complete freedom, an incredible salary. Triple what Caleb pays you." "Work with you where?" "I have a new company, growing fast, lots of opportunities. I need someone with your skills." Grace studied him for a moment. "And in return?" "In return, you forget what you discovered. You let it go. You move on with your life. Are you trying to bribe me?" "I'm offering a solution that benefits everyone." Grace got up from her chair. "Richard, my answer is no. You haven't even heard my full offer. I don't need to. I don't sell my principles. I don't trade loyalty for status." Richard lost his smile. "Grace, you don't understand. This could get complicated for you." "Is that a threat?" "It's friendly advice." Grace went to the door and opened it. "This conversation is over, and you have 5 minutes to leave the building before I call security." Richard stood up, without any pretense of cordiality. "You'll regret this." "I doubt it." After Richard left, Grace immediately called Caleb and told him about the visit. "He tried to bribe you." "He did, and when I refused, he made veiled threats." "Grace, that proves we're on the right track. He's desperate." "Exactly. I'm going to fast-track the documentation of the evidence." At the end of the day, Grace had organized a complete dossier with all the evidence of Richard's fraud. On Monday, Caleb contacted his lawyers and presented everything to the proper authorities. A week later, Richard was indicted for embezzlement and conspiracy to defraud a company. The evidence was irrefutable. "Without you, he would have gotten away with it," Caleb said to Grace that night. "He made a mistake by trying to buy me off." "Why do you think he did that?" "Arrogance. He thought everyone has a price." "And you proved that's not true." Grace smiled. "Some things aren't for sale." Lila, who was listening to the conversation from the living room, ran over to them. "Grace, you're a hero." "I'm not a hero, Lila. I just did my job. You are a hero to me." That night, after Lila went to sleep, Caleb and Grace talked on the porch as they always did. "Do you know what impresses me most about you?" he said. "What?" "Your integrity. Richard offered you everything that many people dream of having. But at the cost of betraying you and the company, that's not worth any amount of money. Not everyone thinks that way. I do, and I always will." Caleb looked at her with an admiration that went far beyond the professional. "Grace, you saved my company twice. First by discovering Marcus's fraud, then by refusing Richard's offer. I did what was right. And that's exactly why you're so special." Grace was quiet, looking at the garden where Lila played in the mornings. "Caleb, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you really trust me? Completely?" "Completely." "Why?" "Because it's been a long time since anyone trusted me like that. It's comforting. You deserve that trust, and much more." In the following days, the news of Richard's arrest spread through the office. Employees were shocked, but also relieved. "Grace really cleaned house," commented John from the sales department, using a common idiom. "She restored our credibility," Sandra added. "Now I can say I work here with pride." Caleb observed how Grace had not only restructured the company's processes, but also regained the trust of the entire team. She had become a natural leader, respected for her competence and admired for her integrity. At home, Grace continued to be the same caring and stable presence. She helped Lila with her schoolwork, prepared dinners, and had those nightly conversations that had become fundamental to Caleb's well-being. "How do you balance all this?" he asked one night. "Balance what?" "Being the competent executive at the office and the caring person at home," Grace smiled. "They aren't different people, Caleb. It's the same person in different contexts. And who is that person?" "Someone who found her place in the world again." Caleb felt there was much more behind that answer, but he didn't press. Grace had proven, in every possible way, that she was exactly who she appeared to be, a person of integrity, competence, and loyalty. And he was beginning to realize that his feelings for her went far beyond professional gratitude or personal admiration. But that was a conversation for another time. For now, it was enough to know that Grace was there, strengthening his company and completing his family, asking for nothing in return but trust and respect, and that she had in abundance. 3 months after starting at the company, Grace was at her desk reviewing reports when she realized something that made her stop completely. It wasn't the numbers on the paper that worried her, but the growing feeling that her life had changed in a way she hadn't planned. She was no longer just the woman who had lost everything and needed help. She wasn't just the competent employee who had saved Caleb's company. She had become an integral part of their lives, and that scared her deeply. That night, after Lila went to sleep, Grace stood on the porch looking out at the garden. It was a ritual that had become natural, those quiet moments before she retired to her room. But this time, instead of peace, she felt a growing unease. "You're quiet today," Caleb observed, bringing 2 cups of tea as he always did, "just thinking." "About work," Grace hesitated. It wasn't about work. It was about how she felt when she came home and saw Lila running to hug her. It was about how she looked forward to those nightly moments with Caleb. It was about how the word home had naturally started to refer to that place. "About change," she said finally. "What kind of change?" Grace took a sip of tea, choosing her words carefully. "When I came here, it was temporary, remember?" Caleb felt something clench in his chest. "I remember. But things have changed." "Exactly. And sometimes I wonder if they've changed too much." She said nothing more that night, but Caleb stayed awake for hours thinking about the conversation. In the following days, Grace began to observe her own routine with new eyes. How she woke up thinking about what to make for breakfast. How she worried when Lila came home from school late. How she anxiously awaited the nightly conversations with Caleb. "Are you okay?" Lila asked one afternoon, noticing that Grace was more distracted than usual. "Of course, sweetheart. Why do you ask?" "You seem different, sad." Grace knelt down to be at Lila's height. "I'm not sad. I'm just thinking about some things." "Bad things?" No, just things. But Grace knew she wasn't being completely honest. She had realized that she was getting attached in a way she hadn't experienced in years. To the house, with its cozy atmosphere and its familiar corners. To Lila, with her easy laugh and her endless stories about horses. And to Caleb, with his genuine kindness and his way of making her feel valued. The problem was that this attachment scared her. Grace had built solid emotional walls after losing everything. She had learned not to depend on anyone, not to allow herself to have vulnerabilities that could be used against her. And now, without realizing it, those walls had completely come down. A week later, during a meeting at the office, Grace was surprised to find herself thinking about how Lila was doing on her math test instead of concentrating on the financial reports. That afternoon, she cancelled a meeting because she wanted to get home in time to help Lila with her homework. "I got back on my feet," she muttered to herself in the car. "But I'm getting more involved than I should be." The realization hit her like a punch. She had promised herself that this was temporary, that she would regain her independence and move on with her life. But somewhere along the way, she had started to build roots she hadn't planned on, and that terrified her. Grace had learned in the most painful way possible that everything could be taken from her in a matter of hours. Her career, her reputation, her financial stability, everything had disappeared overnight. And now, without realizing it, she had created a new vulnerability. If something happened to Caleb, if he decided he no longer needed her, if her presence in their lives became inconvenient, she would be back at square one. But this time it would be worse, because she would have lost not only material things, but people she loved. The word loved made her stop breathing for a moment, that was it. She loved Lila as if she were her own daughter, and she loved Caleb in a way she hadn't even admitted to herself. Over the weekend, Grace observed her life in that house with a new perspective. She saw how Lila automatically turned to her when she needed help, how Caleb included her opinion in family decisions, how all three of them functioned as a natural unit. And it terrified her. On Monday, Grace came to work with a decision made. She spent the day organizing her projects, delegating responsibilities, and preparing detailed reports on the progress of all ongoing audits. "Are you okay?" Sandra asked, noticing that Grace was more systematic than usual. "Perfectly fine. Just organizing some things." On Tuesday, Grace started looking for apartments to rent. She told herself it was just a precaution, but she knew it was more than that. On Wednesday, she mustered the courage and talked to Caleb. "I need to talk to you about something important," she said when he got home from work. "Of course." "What happened?" Grace took a deep breath. "I think it's time for me to look for my own place." Caleb felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. "Why? Did something happen?" "Nothing happened. It's just that, when I came here, it was temporary. And it's been 4 months. Grace, you know you can stay as long as you want." "I know. And that's exactly the problem. I don't understand." Grace sat down in the living room and Caleb joined her. "Caleb, I got too used to all this. To the house, to the routine, to you both. And that wasn't the plan." "What was the plan?" "The plan was to get back on my feet and move on with my independent life. But I'm creating roots that I shouldn't be." Caleb studied her for a moment. "And that's a bad thing. It's dangerous. For me." "Why?" Grace hesitated, trying to find the right words. "Because I've already lost everything once. I learned that I can't depend on anything or anyone but myself. And now," she gestured around, "now I'm doing exactly what I swore I wouldn't do again." "Grace, this isn't going to disappear overnight. You can't guarantee that." "I can." "You can't. Nobody can." They were silent for a few minutes. "When do you plan to move?" Caleb asked finally. "I found an apartment. I can move out by the end of the week." Caleb felt a pain in his chest that he didn't know was possible. "What about work?" "I'll continue working at the company, of course. That doesn't change anything professionally." But they both knew it changed everything. That night, Grace told Lila about her decision. "Are you leaving?" Lila asked, her eyes filling with tears. "I'm going to live in my own apartment, but I'll still be working with your dad and we'll still see each other." "But why? Don't you like living here anymore?" Grace felt her heart break. "I like it very much, sweetheart, But sometimes adults need to have their own home. But I don't want you to leave. Grace hugged Lila, fighting back her own tears. I know, sweetheart, I don't want to either. Then why are you going? It was a simple question, but Grace didn't have an answer that a 6-year-old could understand. Sometimes we do things we don't want to, because we think it's the right thing. But what if it's not the right thing? Grace didn't answer. On Friday, Grace packed her bags. It wasn't much. She had arrived with just a backpack and was leaving with little more than that. But each item she packed seemed to carry the weight of memories she had created in that house. You don't have to go, Caleb said, leaning against the bedroom door. I do. Why? Grace stopped packing her clothes and looked at him. Because I'm scared. Scared of what? Of getting so used to all this that I can't live without it anymore. What if you don't have to live without it? Everyone has to, at some point. Caleb walked into the room and sat on the bed. Grace, look at me. She obeyed. I'm not leaving. Lila isn't leaving. This house isn't disappearing. And your place here isn't either. You don't understand. Then explain it to me. Grace sat down next to him. When I lost everything, I swore I would never allow myself to be that vulnerable again. I would never depend on something that could be taken away from me. And now you feel vulnerable here. Because you've both become too important to me. And that's a bad thing. It's risky. Caleb took her hand. Grace, risk is part of life, and some things are worth the risk. I used to think that, before, and now. Now I know that things can end very quickly. Caleb was quiet for a moment. You're right, they can end, but they also might not. And if you run away now, they definitely will end. Grace didn't answer, but she didn't pull her hand away from his. On Saturday morning, Grace said goodbye, first to Lila, who cried without fully understanding why Grace had to leave, then to Caleb, who hugged her for a long time. The door is always open, he said. I know. Really, Grace? Always? Grace nodded and got in her car. She drove to her new apartment with a heavy heart, but determined to regain her emotional independence. The apartment was small but clean and well located. Grace spent the weekend organizing her few things and trying to convince herself that she had made the right choice. But on Monday, when she woke up to go to work, the absence of the morning sounds from Caleb's house, Lila running down the stairs, the sound of the coffee maker, the lively conversations at breakfast, was like a physical void. At the office, everyone noticed that Grace was different, more professional, more distant. She did her job with the same competence as always, but she had lost some of the naturalness she had developed. Is Grace okay? Sandra asked John at lunch. I think she moved out of the boss's house. Why? I don't know, but she's not the same. And she really wasn't. Caleb was also different, quieter, less patient. Lila asked about Grace every day. When is Grace coming back home? She has her own home now, sweetheart. But can she come over for dinner? She can, if she wants to. But Grace didn't come. She kept a respectful distance, greeting Caleb professionally at the office and avoiding personal conversations. The house really did become quieter. There was no longer the sound of two voices talking while making dinner. There was no longer Lila's laughter being helped with her homework. There were no longer the nightly conversations on the porch. For the first time, both Caleb and Lila realized how much Grace was a part of everything. The house is sad, Daddy, Lila said one night. Why do you think that? Because it's too quiet. Grace made good noise. Caleb knew exactly what Lila meant. 2 weeks after Grace moved out, Caleb made a decision. He called her after work. Grace, can I invite you to have dinner with us tomorrow? Grace hesitated. Caleb, I don't think that's a good idea. Lila misses you. And I do too. I miss you too, but then come, it's just dinner. Grace was silent for a long moment. All right, just dinner. The next day, Grace arrived at the house that had been hers for 4 months with a strange feeling. It was like revisiting a dream. Lila greeted her at the door with a restrained hug, as if she was afraid Grace might disappear again at any moment. I missed you, Lila whispered against Grace's shoulder. I missed you too, sweetheart. Dinner was quieter than Grace remembered. Everyone seemed to be walking on eggshells. avoiding saying anything that might break the fragile normalcy of the moment. After Lila went to sleep, Caleb and Grace went out to the garden. It was automatic, their bodies remembered the routine, even if their minds were resisting. "How are you doing?" Caleb asked. "I'm good, adjusting to the new apartment." "And work?" "It's fine." They were silent, looking at the stars. "Grace," Caleb said finally. "Yes? Can I tell you something?" Grace nodded. "You've been a mother to my daughter." Grace felt her eyes well up with tears. "Caleb, it's true. Lila never had that, and you gave it to her without expecting anything in return." "I love Lila." "I know, and she loves you too." They were quiet again. "And you also brought me peace," Caleb continued. "A peace I didn't know I needed." Grace looked at him. "Caleb, I can't." "You complete me, Grace." The words hung in the air between them. Grace felt all her defenses crumble at once. It wasn't an impulsive confession from a lonely man. It was the truth, said with calmness and certainty. She reached out and held his hand. "I love you too," she whispered. Caleb turned to her, and their eyes met in the darkness of the garden. "Then why did you run away?" "Because I'm afraid of losing everything again." "What if you don't lose it?" "What if I do?" Caleb moved closer to her. "Grace, some things are worth the risk." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I'm willing to bet my life on it." Grace looked at him for a long moment. She saw the sincerity in his eyes, the certainty in his voice, and for the first time in months, she allowed herself to consider the possibility that maybe, just maybe, some things were permanent. Caleb moved closer and hugged her. It wasn't a hug of passion or desperation. It was a hug of recognition, of acceptance, of two people who were finally admitting what they had both known for months. It was a mature love, a love with roots. "Come home," Caleb whispered against her hair. "What if—" "Come home, Grace." And for the first time since she had moved out, Grace considered the possibility that maybe home wasn't a place that could be lost. Maybe it was something you build, brick by brick, day by day, with people who choose to stay. The morning after the conversation in the garden, Grace woke up in her apartment with a certainty she hadn't felt in months. It was no longer about fear or security. It was about choice and affection. She called Caleb before he left for work. "Can I talk to you today?" "Of course." "At the office?" "At home, if possible." There was a pause filled with expectation on the other end of the line. "Grace, are you—" "I want to come home, Caleb, if you'll still have me." The silence that followed was full of emotion and relief. "We will always want you here." "Always." That afternoon, Grace returned home carrying the same small bag she had left with 2 weeks earlier. But this time it was completely different. She wasn't returning out of necessity or gratitude. She was returning out of choice and genuine affection. Lila was waiting anxiously at the door, trying to contain the euphoria that shone in her bright eyes. "Are you staying this time? Forever?" Grace knelt down in front of the girl, looking directly into her eyes. "I'll stay forever, if you'll let me." "Really forever? You won't leave again?" "Really forever. I promise." Lila threw herself into Grace's arms with a heartbreaking sense of relief, as if she could finally breathe again. "I knew you'd come back. I drew our family every day you were gone." "Seriously? Did you show your dad?" "I did. He was sad too. Very sad." Grace looked over Lila's shoulder and saw Caleb watching the scene from the doorway, a look of profound gratitude on his face. "It was the longest 2 weeks of my life," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "'Twas mine too." That night, after Grace put her clothes away in the same room she had left, but that now truly felt like her own, the three of them had dinner together, as if she had never left. But there was something different in the air, a lightness that hadn't been there before. "Can I ask an important question?" Lila said, thoughtfully poking at her mashed potatoes. "Of course, sweetheart," Grace replied. "Are you Daddy's girlfriend now?" Caleb almost choked on his water. Grace smiled in amusement. "Why do you ask that?" "Because you were looking at each other differently today, like in the movies." Grace and Caleb exchanged an amused and embarrassed look. "Adults are complicated, Lila," Grace said carefully. Sometimes it takes them a long time to understand their own feelings. But do you really like each other? We like each other very much, Caleb replied, his voice soft. And are you going to marry Grace? Lila, Caleb protested, blushing. It's a normal question, Lila defended seriously. Don't all real families have a mum and a dad? Grace felt something deep stir in her chest. Families come in all shapes and sizes, remember? The important thing is the love. I know, but it would be nice if you got married. Then I would have a real mum. Caleb and Grace laughed, but they both knew that Lila's observation had touched on something very profound. In the following weeks, the house truly gained a different glow. It wasn't just because Grace had returned, but because she had returned by choice. The difference was palpable in every corner. Grace no longer moved through the house with the carefulness of a guest. She reorganized the kitchen in a way that worked better. She bought colorful plants for the porch. She hung a drawing that Lila had given her on the hallway wall. You're marking your territory, Caleb joked, seeing Grace arrange fresh flowers on the living room table. I'm making this house my real home, she corrected with a smile. Our home, he said, moving closer. Our home. Lila was also visibly different. More confident, more communicative, more self-assured. At school, she started talking about Grace as if she had always been part of the family. My Grace said that horses can tell when people are nervous, she proudly told her teacher during a presentation about animals. Your Grace? Yes. She lives with me and my dad. She's very smart. The teacher called Caleb that afternoon, curious. Lila has been mentioning someone named Grace a lot. Can I ask who she is? She's a very important person in our lives, Caleb replied. I see. Lila seems so much more secure lately. Whoever this Grace is, she's doing her good. Caleb was also different, lighter, more present, more relaxed. At the office, Sandra commented to her colleagues, the boss seems more relaxed lately, less stressed. It must be because Grace came back, John observed. Are they a couple? Not officially, but anyone can see that they love each other. One Saturday afternoon, 3 weeks after Grace's return, Lila was in the living room drawing while Grace and Caleb prepared lunch together. It was a common domestic scene, but it was filled with meaning. Grace, Lila called from the living room. Can you come here? Grace dried her hands and went to where Lila was sitting on the floor, surrounded by colored pencils and paper. What is it, sweetheart? I made a special drawing for you. Lila held out a paper on which she had drawn 3 figures holding hands. A tall one with dark hair representing Caleb, a medium one with blonde hair representing Grace, and a small one also with blonde hair representing herself. All of them were smiling. At the top of the page, in carefully written, colorful letters, it said, Our family is complete now. Grace felt her eyes fill with tears of happiness. Lila, this is wonderful. It's the 3 of us together. Do you like it? It's the most beautiful drawing I've ever seen. Grace called Caleb, who came from the kitchen wiping his hands on his apron. Look at what our daughter drew. Caleb gently took the paper and was silent for a long moment, looking at the 3 stick figures holding hands and absorbing the meaning. So our family is complete now, he read aloud, the emotion clear in every word. Grace watched the emotion take over his face, saw his eyes fill with genuine happiness. You were the missing piece in this family, he said, looking directly at Grace. The words hung in the air of the room, heavy with the weight of everything they had built together. Can I put it on the fridge? Lila asked anxiously. We're going to frame it, Grace said, kneeling beside the girl. This drawing deserves a special place. Really, really, it's our official family portrait. That night, after Lila went to sleep, Caleb and Grace sat on the porch contemplating the framed drawing on the coffee table. 3 figures holding hands, Caleb observed. A real family, Grace added. Grace, you realize this changes everything, don't you? What? You accepting to be an official part of our family? Grace looked at him with curiosity. Grace, I love you deeply. Lila loves you as if you were her mother, and you love us with the same intensity. This isn't about you staying here temporarily anymore. It's about us building something permanent together. A family, chosen consciously. Exactly. Grace was quiet for a moment. Caleb, Are you sure? After everything I've been through? What problems? You saved my company. You turned our house into a home. You gave Lila what I could never give her alone. What was that? A maternal figure. Someone who listens to her stories about horses with infinite patience. Someone who knows exactly what to say when she's sad. Grace smiled tenderly. She gave me much more than I gave her. What do you mean? She gave me the chance to be a mom. She gave me the opportunity to love a child as if she were my own. Caleb took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. Grace, I want to ask you an important question. I'm listening. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife and officially Lila's mother? Grace felt her heart race and then stop for a moment. Caleb, you don't have to answer now. I just want you to know that this is what I want, to make official what we already are. Grace looked at him, at the illuminated house behind them, at Lila's drawing representing their family. Yes, she answered without hesitation. Yes. Yes, I want to marry you. I want to be your wife and Lila's mother. Caleb pulled her into a long hug that lasted for several minutes. Should we tell Lila tomorrow? Let's. She's going to be ecstatic. And she was. When she found out that Grace would officially be her stepmother, Lila danced around the house singing, I'm going to have a real mom. You always had a real mom, Grace corrected. Just not officially. Now it's going to be official. Can I call you Mom? Grace felt her heart overflow. Of course you can. Mom Grace! Mom Grace! Lila shouted, testing out the words. 6 months later, in a simple ceremony in the house's garden, Grace and Caleb got married. Lila was the maid of honor, wearing a yellow dress that she chose herself because it matches happiness. During the vows, Caleb talked about how Grace had arrived as a stranger and had become the heart of the family. Grace talked about how she had learned that home wasn't a place, but people who chose to stay. I promise to be a good mom to Lila, she said. I promise to be a good daughter to you, Lila replied, making everyone laugh through their tears. That night, after all the guests had left and Lila was asleep, Grace and Caleb sat on the porch as they always did, now officially married. How does it feel to be officially part of the Hartley family? Caleb asked. Like I always have been. You always were. Grace looked at the house that was now legally hers too. She remembered the scared woman who had sat on that bench more than a year ago, with no idea that her life was about to change. You know what the most incredible part of all this is, she said. What? It wasn't destiny. It was choices. Your choice to invite me to dinner, my choice to accept. Your choice to offer me shelter, my choice to stay. Your choice to give me an opportunity, my choice to be honest. And our choice to love each other. Exactly. Caleb pulled her closer. Grace Whitmore Hartley. It has a nice ring to it. It really does. They fell silent, watching the stars. After a while, Grace spoke. You realize Lila was right about her drawing. What do you mean? Our family really is complete now. It was complete from the first day you set foot in this house. No. It was being built, brick by brick, day by day. Grace was right. She hadn't arrived to complete a story that already existed. She had become the heart of this new story. A true family formed by mutual respect, daily courage and a quiet but profoundly true love. Grace was not taken in out of pity or charity. She was recognized for who she really was, a woman of integrity, competence, and loyalty. She was genuinely listened to when she needed to be heard. She was respected when she deserved respect. And with sincere affection and unwavering ethics, she transformed a functional house into a true home, not because there was something broken that needed to be fixed, but because there was love that needed space to grow. 3 people who found in each other exactly what they didn't know they were looking for. A family chosen consciously, a true family. The kind of family that is built not on blood, but on daily affection, not on obligation, but on the constant choice to stay. And on that porch, under the stars that witnessed their entire journey, Grace finally understood that some stories don't have a definitive end. They just turn into wonderful beginnings. The beginning of a lifetime of mornings together, family dinners, conversations on the porch, drawings on the fridge, and love that grows every day. Grace had lost one life, and found another that was infinitely better, truer, more her own. A life where she was not just accepted but essential, where she didn't just live but belonged, where she wasn't just loved but loved back with all the strength of a heart that had learned that some people are worth taking risks for. And on that cozy porch, under the stars that had witnessed their entire transformative journey, Grace finally understood a fundamental truth. Some stories don't have an end, they just turn into beginnings. Grace had lost one life and found a better one, truer, more her own, a life where she was essential, where she belonged, where she loved and was loved. She didn't come to complete a story, she became the heart of it. And this was just the first page of the rest of their lives together. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.